that is a great transition here
Yep.
to one of the most important issues, which nobody ever talks about: housing affordability. What can we actually do about it, and how central this is for voting issues? Let's put this up there on the screen. So I hear a lot of Republicans like, oh, these Gen Z folks, they're obsessed with trans and all
pronouns,
this.
et cetera, et cetera.
And some of that is true for people who are online. But it turns out that they're just like the rest of us. This is a new survey from Redfin. Housing affordability is the Gen Z top voting issue, outweighing abortion and the economy, although I would put it with the economy. More than 9 in 10 adult Gen Zers say that housing affordability is important when considering who they will vote in their upcoming presidential election. It is the top issue by ranking from that new report from Redfin, and that Gen Zers, quote, were more likely to rate housing affordability as an important factor in their vote than any other issue that they were asked about, including the economy, abortion, guns, preserving democracy, and foreign wars. This is from 3,000 US homeowners and renters that they just conducted in February of 2024. Why I think that this is so important is that if you look at the breakdown, and this actually is Gen Z specifically, but I'll include everybody. Gen Z, this is the ranking. Housing affordability, 91%. Strength of the overall economy, 82%. Education, 82%. Then guns and abortion. So the culture issues are 4 and 5 that are in that ranking. If you shift over to millennials, you can actually see that this, quote, strength of the overall democracy, education, and housing affordability are all top 3. They're actually roughly tied. It's like 89 and 87%. We're quibbling within a percentage point or so. Housing affordability begins to drop only amongst Gen Xers and amongst boomers from 4th and almost 6th, specifically whenever it comes to the boomers. So the younger you are in this country, Gen Z in particular, because they're at the very entry of the housing market, and they're probably the ones getting squeezed the most by all this rent inflation, because they had to come in where I at least had some roughly cheaper rent maybe 10 years ago. But nowadays, I mean, they're walking in and just getting hit right off the bat. Put this up on the screen just to illustrate how disastrous things are right now. The median mortgage payment in the United States is currently at a record high of $2,894 per month in May of 2024. That is a 14% increase from just 2023. It's a 23% increase from 2022. And wait for this one, it is a 78% increase from 2021. A 78% increase for the median monthly mortgage payment from 2021 in just the span of 3 years. No wonder you should be freaking out. That is straight up unattainable. That's almost $3,000 a month. That's 36 grand a year, roughly, after tax income that is coming out. If you want to try and not break the rule of it shouldn't be more than a third of your take-home pay or whatever, good luck. Hope you make 100 grand. You know, it's like, and then if you do make 100 grand, you're very likely not living in a place where you can get anywhere close to that median. You are living in one of the top 10 metro areas, and you're gonna be ponying up $1 million for a house if you're even lucky to be able to afford one. Or you better have rich parents. Good luck to you.
I mean, a 78% increase just from
That's
2021.
Nuts. Right. Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And listen, one of the things I found interesting in the Redfin survey of like people's issue priorities. So when you get to Gen X and boomers who benefited, you know, when they were coming into adulthood from much more affordable housing, you know, certainly for the boomers, less so for the Xers, but still, they rank preserving democracy above housing affordability. And obviously that's the pitch that the Democratic Party is really leaning into, that along with abortion rights. But the preserving democracy, that's been central for Biden. It was central in the last campaign. It's central for him now. And listen, the bottom line is you can't really expect people to care that much about preserving democracy if they feel like democracy hasn't been good for them. They're just not going to prioritize that highly. You know, the way for people to really care about democracy is when they see the democracy delivering for them and their families. Then it's like, okay, this is a great system. This is something that's worth fighting for and worth preserving. But if all you see is, you know, your concerns getting ignored and asset prices going up and up and up year after year after year in a way that benefits people who already own those assets, but completely screws people who are shut out of ever owning those assets, then yeah, you're going to prioritize other things and you're not going to be as impressed with the like, but Trump argument this time around. And that's exactly what we're seeing. I mentioned the asset prices. This is related to this. Put the Wall Street Journal thing up on the screen, which shows one of the major bifurcations in our economy, because it really is a tale of the haves and have-nots. Americans overall now have more investment income than ever before. Booming economy, rising household wealth help some consumers to keep spending. So people who have houses, people who have 401ks that are flush with investment cash, people who have stocks, who have mutual funds, who have bonds, those people are doing very well. And effectively, not to get too much in the economic weeds here, but we've had decades where a lot of economic policy has basically been dedicated to increasing and increasing and increasing asset prices, which again is great if you already own stuff and is terrible if you don't and you would like to one day have a house, for example, and be able to get into the asset ownership economy. And we never talked about that as inflation, right? It was seen to be totally separate from what people are paying at the grocery store and those sorts of transactions. Well, first of all, they're not totally separate. And second of all, when you create this huge divide between the asset ownership class and everyone else, that just continues to spiral out of control. And we have more indications of that you can put this up on the screen. The world has never had as many rich people as it does right now. The world's richest have never been so wealthy. So according to a new study, the number of high net worth individuals rose by 5% last year. So yeah, again, if you've got a lot of stocks, if you've got a house, and you're seeing the way those prices are spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, this is all working out pretty well for you. But if you're Gen Z, if you're millennial, if you're, Gen Alpha when they come along as well, assuming this trend continues, this is a really dire situation. And you have so little hope of achieving the level of stability and comfort and just like middle class lack of precarity that your parents may have benefited from.
Yeah, absolutely. You really see a real shift too. Also, I kind of hate stuff like that too, because there's a lot of neoliberals out there who will be like, see, we're living in the best time. They're like, world's richest have never been so wealthy. The vast majority of this new wealth is coming from China. I just listened to this great series. It's called The Acquired Podcast. Shout out to The Acquired Podcast. It's like a history of companies, and they did Hermes. So I was listening, interesting in terms of the history of luxury goods. Over 50% of their business now is just from China. Like all of their growth is China. And then the other 10% is Japan. If you look at a lot of this stuff that's getting rolled up, it is at the direct expense of the American middle class, and multi-billionaires are getting created overseas. There was a guy named Donald Trump. He used to talk about this back in the day.
Not so much anymore.
Not as much anymore. Yeah, I guess if he did, maybe it would help him out. But what we see is very important is that overall fundamentals of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the genuine American dream post-World War II order, it has eroded to the point of it basically being dead, with the combination of high interest rates, extremely high prices, and a very, very middle and soft job market. Now, again, I want to explain there because the Biden administration plays tricks. Oh, we have 4% unemployment, et cetera. When you look at the wages and you look at the level of underemployment, specifically with a lot of these Gen Zs, and you combine household debt, credit card debt, and student debt on top of that, it's the rawest deal since, basically from the beginning. Let's also put this up there again on the screen just to see people for swing voters. Amongst swing voters, policies that could be part of Biden's second term, swing voters are split on which would make them vote for him. But what you see increasingly is that the economy and the high cost of living and anything that could actually address that is wildly popular. The most popular, in this survey is raising taxes on the wealthy at 23%, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, increased border security at 17%, expansion of Medicare to vision, dental, and hearing at 16%, increased protections for abortion at 16%, crackdown on corporate price gouging gouging is 16, limit the sale of assault weapons 12, cancel student debt for more borrowers 11, increase funding for. So you see a mix and a smattering of culture. But at the very, very top, you've got raising taxes on the wealthy, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I mean, it's very clear what the impetus and the things that could actually bring people out to vote for you. And you could do it in such a way where you don't have to touch anybody's household balance sheets or any of these things. I really encourage people to go and to learn about things like the step-up basis for multi-gajillionaires and for the carried interest loophole. I mean, that one alone in terms of, or high-frequency trading tax, any of this stuff, if you adjust that even marginally to like 1%, right now the carried interest is 0. So let's say we put like 5%. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that are unlocked immediately. Nobody on earth, except for a bunch of people on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, would feel that. And yet, it's smeared by a lot of those people in the same way as if you're going to some doctor's house who's making 300 grand and be like, all right, doc, it's time to pony up 10% more of your income. That's what the sheer reality of how the ultra wealthy get away with paying effective tax rates of like 5 to 10% through manipulating the tax code is one which has been lost from the national discourse. And it's really a tragedy. But at the very least, people do intuitively understand that you can do that, and you should, in some cases, while actually still not touching even the middle class, upper middle class way of life at all. You don't have to.
It's very interesting what just happened in Mexico and the Mexican economic model under AMLO, because it is a direct contradiction of all of the, all of the talking points of neoliberalism. The idea of like rising tide lifts all boats. So if we just keep growing the GDP, if we just, keep shipping tax cuts to the rich and to corporations, and that's going to cause GDP growth to rise, that's going to be good for everyone. Well, the Mexican economy, it hasn't been growing gangbusters. It's been fairly anemic in terms of GDP growth. But the policy, a variety of policies, but one of them in particular, which was these sort of aggressive hikes of the minimum wage, which really delivered for a vast majority of average Mexicans, made it so that even under relatively anemic GDP growth, people felt like, but this is working much better for me. That is so directly contradictory to the logic that has prevailed here for, my entire life and your entire life, certainly. So I thought that was an extraordinary example. And obviously, not only was it good for average workers there, but obviously it was extraordinarily good for AMLO and now his successor in terms of electoral politics. So, if you look at these surveys, it's not a mystery. The number one thing that people say would shift them to Biden is if he raised taxes on the rich. And he's got a wide open lane because you've got Donald Trump out there meeting with billionaires and saying, I'm going to cut your taxes. I did it last time and I'm going to make sure that we do it again. So the lane is open if anyone wanted to actually take it. And I think the housing one, we've talked about this ad nauseum at this point because it's just so obvious. It's just so clear. And I want to be fair, there are some Democratic proposals that are out there that kind of tinker around the edges. But in terms of someone really taking hold of this issue and really running on it aggressively, it just doesn't happen. And part of it is because you have a lot of powerful interests and a lot of, boomers who vote a whole lot are very interested in keeping those housing prices high and continuing to see an escalation in their own net worth as asset prices continue to inflate and inflate and inflate. So very interesting survey, very revealing of what people's actual priorities are and what could move the needle politically.
Shocking, isn't it? That's, look, and I'll return to what you said about Mexico. And this is a very counter to a lot of the way that Americans think. And this is empirical. Crime under AMLO has gotten out of control. There have been insane cartel killings and all that. He's still one of the most popular presidents in the entire, he's one of the most popular leaders in the world. I'd also point back to Modi. One of the things that people always misunderstand India. The original Modi, 2014 Modi, it had nothing to do with culture. It was about the broken economic consensus of the Congress Party. There was this whole program called Bharat Rice where people were getting free food. 800 million people were getting free food from the government. There was also a direct attack at corruption. He himself was viewed as unassailable. He's not married. And part of the thing is in India, it's very common to have like nepotistic arrangements. So his lack of children was like a big selling point.
connections.
Yeah, exactly. He has no familial network. He can like spread the money around. He was seen in the early period as a real economic savior. Then what happens? After COVID, you have massive inflation. You have all these shocks to the economy. You have some of this crazy stuff going on with Adnani and company, and they really forgot, some of their early roots. And that's what happened with a lot of these low caste voters who then return to the Congress Party. And now with the new coalition, he's going to have, if he wants to win any popular election again, or BJP does, they're going to have to return to that devaluation that happened early, where they tried to target a lot of the corruption, where they really tried to go after inflation. They have to stop necessarily targeting like rich FDI to come in and actually try and rise some of the wages and things like that. So let that be a lesson too, in terms of what things abroad can teach us, here in the country.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they really misjudged their own electorate. And they thought it was like, if we just deliver you this like Hindu nationalist cultural piece, that will be sufficient. And, it looks like they were really rebuked on that.
Yeah, well, and also, look, it's a very different country to poll. There's a huge portion of the population doesn't even read. Like, it's a tough place to actually gauge, like, what the hell is going on. People speak all these different languages. And I'm by no means an expert. This is just from the people that I trust who cover India, from what I've been able to read. But broadly, what it came down to is that they had the choice on, like, what to really emphasize going into the election. And in going with that, they thought they had done enough on the economic front that they could do some of the cultural stuff and fuse that together to win an overwhelming popular majority. But they significantly misjudged how a lot of poorer, lower caste Indians were going to see what they viewed as an abandonment of that economic cause. So by returning, but in the coalition government where they are right now, they're definitely going to have to return to their roots. Or what we were watching is, for years, everyone said, oh, the Congress Party in India is dead. It's dead forever now. Definitely not true. Now, Rahul Gandhi and all these people, they're making a comeback. I don't necessarily want to see that. So you guys better get your act together if you want to return to that big consensus that everybody thought that you had in India. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.